Hi everyone, I'm welcoming you all to today's EAStalk webinar. We had a small pause during the summer and now we are excited to share the interesting topics with you in the following months. I would like to welcome Dr. Constantinos C Mylonas, our presenter today. Dr. Mylonas presented a similar presentation last year preparing a manuscript for scientific publishing. And since then, we have received many requests from the students to cover this topic again. Dr. Constantinos C Mylonas is currently director of the Institute of Marine Biology, Biotechnology and Aquaculture, one of the institutes of the Hellenic Center for Marine Research. Dr. Mylonas has published 143 scientific articles with an 41 ISI-Index, and has co-authored 7 books on the reproduction of fish. He has been on the editorial board of the journal Aquaculture since 2002 and has reviewed 170 manuscripts submitted for consideration in 30 scientific journals. My name is Anna Viskovic, and today I will moderate this webinar. This webinar will last for approximately an hour, with 45 minutes of presentation time and 50 minutes for questions and answers. During the presentation, you can send me a question and then I will forward it to Dr. Mylonas once the presentation is finished. Dr. Mylonas, thank you for accepting the invitation again for joining us today. Please feel free to start your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. Just to confirm, I see on my live event, I do not see any attendees and I don't see any time going, so I'm not sure if this means something to you.
No, it's okay. Yeah, so, because I have already sent you live.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to start my presentation. I'm going to share my screen. Just give me a second to open it up. Okay, so as Anna said, this was a presentation that we gave also last year. It's an evolving presentation. I tried to incorporate some new ideas, some new thoughts, some new information as time goes on, and new things come up in the way of publishing, because things are not the same now as they were many years ago, and in some years there's some very dramatic changes that take place. The structure of the presentation is as follows. We'll go through first the need to get a permission for the experiment that you're going to publish, which becomes very, very important in the last 5 years or decade, but mainly the last 5 years. We'll talk about the structure of the manuscript, what are the parts, the content, talk about references and the graphic and tables that you prepare. And then I have in the second section that usually in my presentations for universities takes 2 hours, is some common language use and common errors. Those will cover some main points, but then there's a lot of slides that I will not show, but they will be in the PDF of the presentation, so you can consult this presentation later on after the talk. Or when you're ready to start writing a manuscript, you can consult it and see some of these language issues. And we sincerely hope that those of you that you're now going to attend the meeting in the EAS meeting in Madeira, and you have a presentation, an oral presentation or a poster presentation, that you will take advantage of this presentation here on how to write a scientific article, and you will prepare your article coming from your presentation at EAS, and would also encourage you to consider the Aquaculture International Journal, which is the journal of our society. So it's very, very, very important that you have an approval for the experiment that you do before you publish it. Many journals require you that you provide proof of approval of the experimentation protocol. As you see here, this is a statement called the ethics approval statement or the ethics statement. This is something that many journals require you to have to confirm, to prove that you have approval for the study obtained by the relevant authorities. In this case, is the Greek National Veterinary Services. So in some journals, you cannot publish unless you have such approval. So you have to be really careful for that. And it's something, of course, that you have to do well before you reach the time of submitting an article. So what is the typical structure of an article? First of all, I will say that in today's internet publishing world, there's no really a typical structure, because there's many different structures available and many different formats, but there is a common, a convention kind of format that is historically has been the only one. Now is a main one, but it's not the exclusive one. So basically, you have the following structure. You have a title page, you have an abstract, an introduction, materials and methods, results, discussion, acknowledgements, references, tables, list of figures, and figures. These are the most common components of an article. There may be other things like accompanying data, attachments, highlights, visual representation, visual summary of the main aspects of the article, and so on. They're changing over time, and they're changing according to the ability and the stylistic request of internet publishing and reading articles on the computer. But you have to realize that some years ago, 10, 20 years ago, people were only reading articles from a print version of a journal, and at those times there were more strict rules. So this is the typical traditional format, but as I said, more recent journals and internet journals will have very different format. It is very important, therefore, before you even start writing your article, to consult what's called the instructions to authors. So you have to first decide which is the journal that you want to submit your work, and then you go to the side of this journal or to the back cover of the last printed issue of the year, where the instructions to authors are being explained. And you have to follow this very, very closely, because if you don't, it's very probable that the editor will send it back to you, will not consider it for a review, or you will get negative comments from the reviews, and you don't want to have problems, issues with your format when you're presenting your work. It's kind of like the suit when you go for an interview. The suit doesn't tell how good of a scientist you are, but it tells how serious of a person you are, how well how serious you take your obligations yourself, and therefore you have to be careful with the format, even though that's only the means to present your work. So read the instructions to authors and follow them closely. A title page is what it says. It's a single page, usually a separate page that has the title, the name of the co-authors, the affiliation of the co-authors, and the corresponding authors' contact information. A title page, the most important aspect of the title page, of course, is the title. And the instructions or the suggestions for the title is that it has to be concise, it has to be short, it shouldn't be five lines long. It has to be concise, but it should be also informative. It should be such that will arrest the attention of a potential reader. A reader going through a table of contents will very quickly scan diagonally, as we say, a table of content, and you should be able to attract the attention of the reader to your title by what you write. So to do that, you have to be very concise, but yet informative. You have to provide sufficient information to allow the reader to judge whether this is a relevant article, so that then they will open it and go to the abstract. And it's very important to try within the title to incorporate, to use keywords that are important in your field, because this will be a way that authors will find your article if they're searching. So use the kind of words that are important to your field, so that people will be able to find this more easily. Then you have an abstract. An abstract, it's in a separate page, but it will not necessarily go through a whole page. Some journals have a rule, have a restriction of how long an abstract would be. It can be their number of words, or it can be a percentage of the total length of the journal, or it can be free. It depends on the journal. Whatever it is, follow the instructions to authors. And the abstract is something that will contain a little bit of everything. It will have an introduction of why this field is important, what were the objectives of the study, what were the major experimental conditions, the experimental design, the major results in numerical format, and then the conclusions and the suggestions, recommendations coming from the research. At the end of the abstract, you're usually asked to provide a number of keywords. It can, again, have a maximum of a certain number, or it can be left up to you. Choose your keywords very, very carefully, because this is how search engines will find your articles. And the more people read your article, the more people will be aware of your work, the more impact your work will have, the more citations you have. And the number of citations you have on each of your articles is a form of evaluation of your worth as a scientist. So you definitely want to have as many citations as possible, and making it easier for people to see, to find your journal, your article. It makes it more likely that they will cite your work. Obviously, it depends on the quality of your work, but unless people see it, they will not have the ability to evaluate it. So first, you make everything possible for people to find your work. The introduction now, I give a general rule of thumb that it will be, you should limit it to 2-3 pages long. When I'm talking about pages now, in the form of a manuscript, we're talking about A4 pages with a 2.5 centimeter margin throughout, left, right, top, bottom, and double space. Okay, so this is what I mean by 3 pages. 3 A4 double space pages. So less than 2 pages is very small. It means that maybe you don't have enough of a scope, enough of a content in your article. If you can, if you add an introduction that is less than 2 pages, if you go more than 3 pages, it means probably that you're adding too many stuff, too much information, and it's not really read. It will not be read easily by the reader. Now, what you should include in your introduction, obviously, you start with presenting of the problem. What is the problem that this work is addressing? You will provide some current knowledge of the problem, or what is the situation in this field. You will provide some relevant knowledge either from other areas, or from other species, or from other model animals, or from other years, depending on what kind of study you have. So you will relate to what is available, to what is known about this field, and then you will conclude the introduction with a small paragraphs on the objectives of your study. Then you will have the materials and methods. The materials and methods, I cannot tell you how many pages would be appropriate. It can be, if it's a long paper, it will be many. If it's a short paper, it will be a few. So I cannot give you a numerical suggestion. the materials and methods, the objective of the materials and methods are, number one, for the reader to understand how the study was implemented. So it has to be detailed to the point that people will understand what you did. It should include enough information so that the reader will be able to evaluate the results, whether the results have a meaning, whether the results represent what the experiment wanted them to represent, what the objectives were, and will evaluate whether the study was implemented properly. And finally, another objective is that people should be able to repeat what you did if they want. If they want to confirm that what you did is correct, or if it holds true in another area, in another species, in another context, in another season. So you have to have enough information there that people can repeat the experiment. In terms of the content now, I suggest that you use a chronological order when you're presenting it, a chronological in the sense of how you did the experiment. So first, you talk about the experimental animals that you use, or the site, the conditions of your experiment. Then you present the experimental design, how many animals were used, what are the different treatments, what are the different conditions, what are the different genes that you're looking for, how you went by what are the methods, the techniques that you use to make the data collection. Then you report about the data collection, what are the different things that were collected in terms of data. Then you will report on the analytical method. So basically, you first talk about the experimental animals or site, the design, the data that was collected. Once the data was collected, the samples, they were analyzed. So you will talk about the analytical methods, and then you always complete with the statistical analysis. Statistical analysis is very, very important, and it's something that many articles have a problem with, because statistics, many people don't like to use statistics, or they're difficult, they don't know exactly which statistical analysis to use, but it's something that you have to make an effort to understand statistics properly and use them properly, because statistical analysis will give you the answer of whether two things that you're comparing are different, or they're similar, or they have a relation or not. Far from what you see in the figure that you plot, whether a mean is higher than another one, unless you examine this within a statistical way. Just because a mean is a little bit higher or bigger than another one doesn't mean that your group comes from a different condition, that the group behaved differently. In the results now, again, I cannot give you a rule on how many pages. It will depend on how long your article will be, I mean, how much data you have. Here in this section, you will present the results again in chronological order, I suggest, because it's easier for people to follow the data if it has a chronological order. That is, you're going to first present, for example, what are the size of the animals that you measured, then what is the size of their gonads, then you're going to look into the histology, then you're going to look into the hormones. So follow something that is logical in the sense of the way that the data was collected. So it will follow basically the order of presentation in the materials and methods. In the results, you make reference to the tables and the figures that you present in the article. All tables and all figures that are presented must be referred to, must be cited in the results. This is a rule. And there's also a rule that there's absolutely no discussion to be made in the results. So you don't provide any opinions, you don't provide any conclusions. You just plainly and coolly present the results. The only reason that you may add some discussion or make some express an opinion in the section of the results is if based on the results, you decided to do another experiment or another analysis that was not planned originally. In that case, you will say that based on the fact that this data was contrary to what we observed measured in the literature, we decided to carry out another analysis, and then we found this and this. This is reasonable to have in the results. Otherwise, no opinions, no conclusions in the results. In the discussion section now, I say that you should have at least 3 pages of discussion. Again, anything less will mean that you don't make a thorough evaluation of the situation, of the results. You don't make a thorough relation to what is known. 3 pages, double space, is very, very poor. Less than 3 pages. So a minimum of 3 and up to whatever numbers will of pages will be enough for you to discuss properly. I mean, with enough depth. And by enough depth, I mean to have these items that you have here. In the discussions, you will interpret your results. You will provide your personal evaluation of what is the meaning of the results. But of course, you will do this by using what is known in other studies. You cannot just decide that, you know, based on the fact that I saw this result, I conclude that this is what happens throughout the world. You have to have some basis to conclude that this is something reasonable or not. So you will compare with other studies. In the discussion, you don't make any reference to results again. The assumption is that the reader, before she went to the discussion to read, has already looked at the results, and she is already aware of the results. So you don't make any reference to the results. You don't make any citations to tables and figures. Again, unless you're providing some new numbers that you're providing them for comparison purposes. That is, if you write that the 10 degrees that were observed in the on the planet so-and-so are significantly higher than the 20 degrees that we observed here, something like this. But in general, you don't refer to the results. In the discussion, of course, you will go on discuss the significance of the study. You know, why is it important? Why does this study why is this study worth considering? What is the contribution of this study to the field? And then you can provide also suggestions for further work. Maybe you will, not maybe, if everything was done properly, your study will result in some questions, not just answers. And therefore you can provide your suggestions for further work to continue to follow on this on the findings of your study. And maybe you will be doing this to prepare the reader for another article of yours that is coming out after that is following this one. So this is a good way, a nice way to introduce, let's say, that to make people wait for another article on this area, or just to suggest other scientists to get them excited to address this field or be involved in this field. And then you will provide some conclusions. Now, the conclusions in some journals, it's a separate section. So there's a section on conclusions, or it's a common for people to have a final paragraph at the end that concludes all the work. Both are acceptable depending on the journal, but it's also possible that the conclusions will follow each paragraph in your discussion, and you will not have a main paragraph of conclusions at the end. But it's not bad to repeat what you have concluded in every paragraph, or the main importance and the main contribution of the article. At the end of the discussion, you have what's called the acknowledgements. In the acknowledgements, it's a paragraph which is very, very important because it provides information about the funding agency and organization that provided the money for the work. This is very, very, very important for many organizations, for the European Union, for many funding organizations. There's an absolute requirement that you provide acknowledgement to their funding, and if you don't, you will get in trouble. You may have money out of your project considered ineligible. And you get in trouble with your program officers if you present work from a project that they fund and you did not acknowledge them. You can also acknowledge the technicians and collaborators that may have contributed a little bit to the study, but not enough to be given a co-authorship, being listed as authors. It is also customary to acknowledge scientists that gave advice either on the study, before the study was even done, or they reviewed your manuscript. Some people that you gave them your manuscript to read before and give you some suggestions. You may acknowledge their help there. It's also quite customary, and I recommend this, to acknowledge reviewers that have improved your manuscript. Once your manuscript is submitted, some people will review it, and then they will let you know, they'll make some corrections, and they will help you improve if they consider that your article is appropriate for publication. And if you feel that some reviewer has spent quite enough of his time, her time, and they do it for free usually, and that resulted in improving your manuscript, it would be good to acknowledge them, because this reviewer probably is somebody from your field and probably will see the article when it's published, and will be will get a good feeling from your acknowledgement, and in a following article that you may submit and she may be reviewing, will be more lenient towards you, or will be positively displaced towards you. Of course, it's not a place to acknowledge your parents or your boyfriend, girlfriend, or your cat. This is something that you do in personal writing and for thesis, but it's not customary for scientific writing for journals. Now, references is a very, very important section of an article, and we use references for different reasons. We use references in order to provide proof to the reader that we have a good knowledge of the field. We use references in order to support what we are doing and what we are concluding, and to give an indication of what are similar or related studies. And we also give suggestions. We use references in order to give suggestions of articles that people should read if they're interested in this type of work. So it has kind of a educational, pedagogical aspect. Again, there's no rule as to how many references you should provide. I gave you just a number, just a rule of thumb to keep in mind, about 50. You don't have too many. The reviewers will ask you to cut it because pages take space, and space costs, so they will cut it down. So I'll give you some more suggestions and some knowledge about citations, because it's, as I said, it's a very important aspect of an article. First thing that I want to say is that you should only cite articles that you have read. It is very, very common that people may misinterpret some articles, and if you cite things that you read in other people's work, you may be citing something that is wrong, and obviously a reviewer that will see that you did this will not consider that you are a serious scientist and will be very negatively, will have a negative feeling towards you that you haven't done a good work reading the literature. So I'm sorry, there's a spell here, be sure of others' interpretations. So you cannot be sure of others' interpretations, so therefore always read the articles if you cite them. If for some reason, and today's in today's world that everything is available in the at the click of a button, there's no excuse for not finding an article. But if there's an article that you really want to cite, a very old article that is historically important, but you don't have it and you want to cite something, this article, and you read it somewhere else, then this is the way you indicate this, by saying that I read this and this and this in Stevens et al, cited in Johnston et al. In this way, you have your qualification that this is what I want to cite, but what I'm saying about this article, I read in this article. I didn't read it myself. But you know, by all means, try to avoid citing articles that you haven't read. Also, it's good to use review articles and book chapters to avoid having too many citations, but these articles and these reviews have to be recent, you know, not longer than 10 years old, unless there hasn't been another review in this field for 20 years, then obviously you can use the review that is 20 years old, but you realize that it will be outdated. Of course, if there's if there's not more recent review, it means that there's not much work that has happened in this area over the last 10 years. That's why there's no more recent review. So by that aspect, you're justified to use it. But don't result only on review papers, because you have to use original articles for the absolutely relevant information. This is a form of acknowledgement to the person that has done the original work, and you're not just citing the person that read this work and reviewed it. You acknowledge the original authors that did the work, but you also show that you are aware of the literature, that you have read all the work that is available and that you have a good understanding of the literature. And then you can point to similar or relevant research by going to by citing these original articles. Be very careful with citing conference presentations. It's okay to cite conference presentations for work that is done, you know, this year, the last year. But if the work is if the presentation was done more than 3 years old, and then you should not include it, in my opinion, for two reasons. Number one, because if it was good, if it was a good work, then it would have found its way in the literature, okay, and therefore you would be able to cite the article that it corresponds to this conference presentation and not the conference presentation. And also a conference presentation, especially if it's an oral presentation, does not allow the reader to evaluate what was presented. An article, a reader will go find the citation, read it, and see if the way you interpreted it is relevant or not. A presentation in a conference, it's something that happened 3 years ago, and if it's a poster, again, it will only be what's written in the abstract, and the abstracts are very often very limited. So it's not a good way of evaluating the content of the science. But the main reason is that if the work was done properly and it was worth it and it's good, it would be published in 2-3 years. If it's not, then I would not consider it worth including. Also, avoid articles in national journals, especially if they're not written in English, except if you're doing it for historical reasons. Choose citations that are in international journals, because those are better reviewed, better evaluated, and the data are more likely to be of the right quality. The structure of the references in terms of the format depends on the journal, so it's very important, again, to look into the instructions to authors for each journal. and there's different form of citation for journals, books, chapters, and conferences. And also learn, I encourage you to learn to use bibliographic software such as EndNote, Mendeley, Zotero, and others. If you use this software, it will help you organize your articles, because you're creating your own database where you can have also the PDF file available at the click of a button, and it will allow you to format the references for your article instantaneously. And if you decide in the middle of your work to change change journals, or if you got it refused and you're going to resubmit to another journal, then you can reformat at the click of a button. So learn to use bibliographic software. Tables, each table has to be presented in a separate page. It has to be in a Word format. Some journals allow Excel to be used for making tables. So this is okay if the journal allows it. The legend is always placed above the table, and it has to be self-explanatory, and the reader should be able to understand what's in the table without having to read the main text. I will put the limit to about 7 tables maximum, not more. Then it becomes too much, too much data, too many tables for somebody to read. There's also a section of the figure legends. You see that the figure legends are provided separately as a text. So you have a list of the figure legends. Again, the figure legends have to be self-explanatory. It should include all the information required for the reader to interpret the figures, and then the figures will be presented separately, one figure per page, and usually in TIFF or JPEG format. Okay, and you do not include any titles in the figures. Okay, so this concludes the first part of the presentation. Let me quickly now go through some of the importance of use of language for scientific writing, which are different than writing a novel or writing an essay or something like that. First of all, it's very important to write in past tense for the results of an experiment or of another study. The work was done in the past. You're writing the article now, but the work was done in the past, so it makes absolutely no sense to use present tense. Also, the difference or the exception is that if you're referring to established, well-accepted theories, then obviously you're going to refer to them in present tense. For example, you will say that the study indicated, okay, it's a study, it's one study, it indicated that yellow sea bass reproduce well in captivity. Maybe somebody else will repeat this experiment in another place, and it will show that yellow sea bass do not reproduce well in captivity. So you cannot say it indicates. You will say it indicates only if it's a confirmed knowledge after many, many experiments. On the contrary, if it's something, like I said, that is a well-accepted fact or a theory, you can use present tense. So it is known that most temperate zone fishes reproduce once a year in nature. This is common. We know it. It's not something that happened in our experiment. It's something that happens in all experiments that we know. I also suggest that you use passive voice. I think this is preferred. It used to be obligatory in scientific writing. Now there's journals that prefer that you use active voice because it sounds a little bit more interesting to the reader. But I think it seems more professional if you use in passive voice. Okay. Also, you avoid referring to I if it's a thesis, or we did this, okay? So it's better, I think, to use passive voice. Subject-verb placement is something that you have to be careful. The verb must be as close to the subject as possible, because otherwise, if you insert too many things in between, then the reader will lose track of what is the important thing. For example, the patient's liver readings had increased by 50% at 48 hours after exposure to the virus. So the important thing is that the subjects, the patient's liver readings increased by 50%. If you add it in this way, by the time you reach to the 50%, you forgot what was your beginning of the sentence. Stress position is also important. A reader expects to see what is important at the end of the sentence. So, for example, if you say introduction of the new assembly line increased manufacturing, it may sound similar to manufacturing increased after the introduction of the new assembly line, but these two sentences may mean different things. The first sentence may mean that the study looked at the various effects of the introduction of the new assembly line, and they found out that the key effect that was observed was an increase in the manufacturing, among other effects. The second sentence may indicate that the study looked at various ways to increase manufacturing, and of these various ways that they looked at, they found that introduction of the new assembly line had the greatest effect. So be careful about stress position and use it at the end of the sentence to stress the important aspect of your findings. Also, another suggestion is to avoid using author names out of parentheses. The citation is a parenthetical information. We use it it's in parentheses because it doesn't have, it's just to support what is shown in the text. It's not relevant to the text in the sense of you understanding the text. So basically, if you're writing something and you have a parenthesis in the middle, it breaks your line of thinking. So you shouldn't put it in the middle. You should put it at the end, and you should put it and you should put it if it's in parenthetically. Okay. And the only exception for using authors' names, that is citations, out of parentheses, is if they are part of what you're saying, in the sense that you want to stress out. For example, contrary to what has been known until now, and you're reporting to all the commonly known now, Zohar, this scientist, and co-workers suggested recently that something else is happening. So you want to stress out that this work, this co-worker, this group of workers found out something that is contrary. Or, for example, if you want to cite the work of some very, very important person, and that will lend tremendous credit to your work, then you obviously may have it outside the parentheses. Another rule that it's good to look and pay attention to, because it will make your reading easier, is where you put a citation to a figure, a table, or another study. And usually, again, to avoid that it breaks the continuity of the sentence, you should put your citation at the end of the sentence, okay, and not in the middle. Because if you put it in the middle, the reader may interpret this that as it is here, that this citation refers only to this part of the sentence and not to the end of the sentence, not to this part of the end. If this is the case, then obviously you want to use the citation at the end of the sentence that the citation refers to, okay? But if the whole sentence refers to the citation, don't be in a hurry to put the citation in the middle of the sentence. Do it at the end of the sentence. And finally, I want to close with this, which is quoting versus paraphrasing. It is very, very important that you do not copy-paste text from other articles, even if these articles are yours. This is called plagiarism, and there's software now that will examine what percentage of your text is copied from other published sources, and if it's more than 5%, people will consider that you stole it, so to speak, that you're performing plagiarism, which is to copy the work of somebody else. To avoid this, you have two options. One is to quote something, so you put it in in quotes, and then you use it ad verbatim. This is the original text. If I want to use exactly what this scientist said, I will put it in quotes, and then I'm justified to do that. I will not be blamed for plagiarism. Or I can paraphrase it, which is I will change the order, I will change some words, I will change the structure of the sentence, that in a way that I will present the same concept, the same meaning, but in a different way, which is my own way. And for you to practice, if you want, you can use this original article and paraphrase it and see how close you'll get to my paraphrasing, which is this one. This text and this text say exactly the same thing. It's from these 3-4 authors, but it's said in a different way so that it will not be considered that you're copy pasting from another work. Closing, this is the structure, this is the preparation sequence that I propose to you. First of all, you prepare the title page. This will form the theme of your paper. And as we say in Greece, beginning is half of everything. So since you began, then you're 50% finished. So this is a big psychological boost. So first prepare your title page with your title, your authors. Then you prepare the graphs and tables. This will create the story of your content. And then you start with the materials and methods, which is easy because you have done it, you know what it is. And then you present the results, which will refer to the graphs and tables. And then you start your introduction. Based on the results you will have, you will build the background, the justification of the study and its objectives. And then you finish with the discussion. You will interpret the results, relate to the current knowledge, suggest and justify further research, and draw conclusions. Then, if you're using bibliographic software, at a click of a button, you will prepare your references, and then, and only then, you prepare your abstract. You will take a couple of sentences from your introduction, a couple of sentences from the materials and methods, a couple of information from the results, and a couple of conclusions from your discussion, and then you have your abstract. And then you read and you read and you read until you feel that you have completed a nice story. This completes my presentation, but in the after these slides, there's other slides that you will see in the PDF if you choose to download it, that has more suggestions and more advice to you in terms of use of language for preparing your manuscript. And I'm open for any questions you may have.
Many thanks, Dr. Mylonas, for presenting interesting webinar on this subject. We received one anonymous question. So what is the correct way of citing a deliverable report from a project? Dr. Mylonas, we can see you still your desktop. Okay, now it's better.
Okay. Well, deliverables are not really a good citation material because some of them they're not publicly available. They may be restricted, so may be confidential, so people may not have access to it, and it's also not a reviewed result. So by citing a deliverable from work, it doesn't mean that this work has been reviewed, evaluated, and approved for publication. So a deliverable is not an acceptable form of reference, of supporting material. It has to be things that are published and peer-reviewed.
Thank you, Dinos. The second question we have is, what was the minimum percentage of similarities in your article that is considered to be plagiarism?
Well, this depends it's different from journal to journal, but I think it's 5%. If you have more than 5% similarity, then it gets a flag and they may reject it for you. And then it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter even if it is your own article, because you know that you have, once you publish something, you no longer have copyright of the article. The journal has copyright of the article. So just because it's your article doesn't give you the right to copy paste from it and publish another article. So I think it's 5%, but don't hold me to it. It may be more, it may be less. Your effort will be to not to copy paste. Obviously, there's some things that they can be said in only one way. We have faced this problem very often, that because we publish things that are similar. All right, so we do histological processing. So we say, okay, histological sections were processed, blah 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 blah, and we have this line that is the same from journal to journal. And very often we get this problem. Well, you have to try to say it in a different way to avoid a journal's software, because this is done by software, not by some person that reads and understands that, okay, it's okay that you use this this material the same, because it refers to the same thing, and it's your own work. Unfortunately, it doesn't go like this.
Thank you, Dinos. The next question is, what you think is the reason why in older articles the introduction section was much shorter than nowadays?
Why the older articles are what? I didn't hear it very well.
What do you think is the reason why in older articles the introduction section was much shorter than nowadays?
I'm not sure this is true. As far as I'm concerned, this has not changed. If anything, I would say that now it's more strict to be brief than it was in the past. So I don't have any experience that will lead me to agree with the person who expressed his opinion. I don't think this is true. I think it's similar. The length of the introduction has not changed.
Okay, thank you, Dinos. We are now going to wait for a few more questions. So the Q&A will last for 15 minutes. So please feel free to ask any question you have for Dinos. We just received a new one. What actually a meta-analysis is?
What?
What actually a meta-analysis is?
What is meta-analysis?
Yes.
Okay. Meta-analysis is when you take data from published work, and then you reanalyze it and you do something else. For example, you want to make it's kind of like a review article in a sense, but it's not just a pure reference to what happens, to what has been published. It's also an analysis. For example, you may be interested to know what is the relation of temperature and the duration of spawning season in fish. There's not a single study that looked at all different fish in the world and their spawning season. There's one study that looked at the spawning season of sea bream. There's another study that looked at the spawning season of amberjack in Australia, and so on. So somebody poses a question: what is the relation of temperature and spawning season? Is spawning season longer when the temperature is lower or when the temperature is higher? So this person will run a search, will get all the articles that have published information on spawning season, and we'll get the data, and we'll say, okay, when the temperature was 15, the spawning season was 20 days. When the temperature was 20, the temperature was 30 days. And we'll make analysis on this. And then it will come up with a conclusion, and we'll say, okay, there's a positive correlation between temperature and the duration of spawning season in freshwater fish, but there isn't such a relation in saltwater fish. This is meta-analysis. And then we'll publish a paper with data that is not original, it's not, they don't belong to him, her, but they were analyzed in a different way. And they provide a certain new meaning, certain new information. So this is a meta-analysis article.
Thank you, Dr. Mylonas. The next question is: when one needs to ask for a copyright permission to use figures taken from the previously published papers.
Okay, the rule is always the rule is always when you use a figure in its entirety, that is, you copy paste the figure and you're going to present it in one of your articles, then you have to request for permission by the journal. And the journal may ask you some information of, you know, whether in order to approve it. Obviously, if it's your article, may have more easily will get an approval if it's your own work. If it's somebody else's work, it may be more difficult to give you approval. But in general, you always need to get approval from a journal to present data that are published. One possibility not to be requiring a permission is if you use part of the data, but you replot it in a different way under different context, including some other information, some additional information, then it becomes a new graph, even though the data, part of the data were included in another journal. And in that case, you will cite, in your citation, you'll say that part of the data provided in this graph were presented in that article in a different form. So you cite then, and then you don't need to have a permission. But in general, you always need to get a permission.
Thank you, Dinos. We don't have any questions for you right now still, but yeah, let's see in a few seconds if we will receive some.
Can I ask one?
Sure,
Yes.
Alistair.
Hi, this is Alistair. I was a scientist a very, very long time ago, and I remember seeing in some publications something called personal communication. Does that still exist, and how should you work with that?
Yes. Personal communication or unpublished data. Thank you for pointing this out, Alistair, and I will make sure I will include it in my presentation for next year, because it's an important issue. Personal communication or unpublished data is a citation. Basically, you cite yourself, data that are not published, or you cite something that somebody else said. Obviously, this may be accepted or may not be accepted by the reviewers, and it depends. If you're citing, let's say that you're citing the fact that fishermen in the Central Aegean have reduced their effort because of climate change. Well, maybe there's not a scientific work on this that presents this that you can cite, but it's something that you know because you're a fishery scientist and you're working with fishermen, you're collecting data, you're talking to them, you've been in the field for a long period of time, so you can say personal communication with that person, which is a well-known authority in this area. Now, to say that if you present hard data and you're citing personal communication, it's more difficult to be accepted. Also, it's acceptable if it may be a work that you have done and it's not yet published, but it's data that you believe in, it's your data, and it's relevant to what you're presenting, and you can say unpublished data. Again, the reviewer may question this. It's not a very easy evaluation point, and it will depend on how well known you may be. If you're a brand new student and this is your first article, then the chances of somebody seeing a personal communication or unpublished data positively are very few. But if you're an established scientist that you have published many articles and you're citing, unpublished data and personal communication, then your word has a bigger value than the word of somebody that is very new. So it's still in use. It's still possible to do, but obviously it should be used with care and with the with economy. It's not something that you can use, 5 times in your article, personal communication. No. But thank you for pointing out, Alistair. I will make sure and add it because it's an important point.
Thank you, Alistair. Do you have any other questions for Dinos?
I could give plenty, but I see there's one just come in that from an anonymous person that says, how acceptable is it to cite an in-press article? I assume that's basically the same as unpublished.
Well, it depends what in-press means, because in the old times, in-press would take a few months. In-press meant that it's an accepted work, and it will appear in print when the next issue comes out. And this was a hard copy issue, so it will take months. So it was very, very accepted, very much accepted to have in press in the older times. And of course, again, this was something that it was a word of honor. If you said, if you cited a work as in press, and it never came in press, and obviously you're in trouble, because there will be in history written that you're citing, probably is going to be your work that you're citing in press, otherwise how would you know? So it will be written in history that you are fooled the system by saying that a work is in press when it wasn't. So it's a huge embarrassment. It's not something that you do lightly, and I don't think I've ever seen work that was listed as in press that never made it to the to press. Now, in today's technology, the work, as soon as it's accepted, it's been online. It goes online, and that's in press. So in press, it means online. So it's available. The only problem there, if you cite it, it's acceptable to cite it, and the journal will accept it. But the problem there is that it may not have the final volume and page numbers to it. But since all documents now, once they become published, they have a DOI, a DOI, then you will have the DOI there. And that's okay. After 2 years, when it will get journal issue, volume, and pages, the citation will modify, but the DOI will be the same, so people can track it. So then it's okay to cite in press work, but with the DOI, so that people will be able to find it.
Okay, thank you. Anna, before you close, I'm just going to ask but 2 very quick questions that have come in. First of all is, and I'll ask you them both, Dinos. First of all, is it okay to use a Google Maps image in a scientific article? And secondly, when we're talking about degree thesis or a PhD thesis, is that acceptable to use as a cited document? And if so, what would be the maximum number that you would advise?
Okay, for the first one, I think you can use Google Maps to present, but you have to get a permission from Google, because you're using a software, you're using a facility that is not yours, so you get a permission. But I've seen in articles maps that are from Google with different locations and so on. So, but you probably need to get some permission from that. In terms of whether master's thesis and PhD thesis are acceptable citation materials, I think they are. I think they are, especially if they're published and available, which they are, and especially now they are electronically available. My problem with that will be similar to, or my recommendation to that will be similar to my recommendation for conference presentations. If a thesis work is 10 years old and you're citing it, I would not consider it serious, because again, if it was serious work, if it was good work, it would have made it to a journal. So if you're citing a thesis of 2020, then I understand that okay, it just published, the thesis was published last year, and it may take you some time to prepare the articles to submit for publication. But citing a thesis from 2015, it means that this work is never going to be published. So if it's never going to be published, then I don't want to trust it because it hasn't been evaluated properly. So yes, you can cite theses and you can cite doctorates if they are of the same or the year before. And I want to add another skepticism there, in that it used to be that people would publish their thesis in the time when Alistair was a scientist. They will publish their thesis and their PhD, and then they will prepare articles. So then it was quite acceptable to publish and to cite thesis. Now, you know very well that almost all universities, they require that you publish articles before they will allow you to defend your thesis. So it's not even true that the articles may come after the thesis. Maybe some, but in this day of age, articles come even before the thesis. So there's no excuse to have data in a thesis that is not in an article. That's why I would not trust it and I would not use it very much.
Thank you, Dinos. We did get a few more questions. Do we have enough time
It's
to answer
fine.
them?
I don't have a problem. I'm here.
Thank you, Dinos. But before I ask you the next questions, I sent in the public chat. We have one question poll for you. So please click on the link I have sent and just send them an answer. We want to know if this is the first time you're participating in this presentation, or you already attended it the last year. So Dinos, the next question is, what is the average time that the manuscript takes to be accepted with reviews by a journal?
I don't think there's an average time because there's different journals. The more important journals have shorter time, like Nature and Science and things like this, because they do a very heavy screening on what they evaluate, and they have very limited time that allows reviewers to evaluate. So there's different journals. So it can be from, I would say, what's a typical or what to expect if you're an average person like I am, and you're not publishing in Science and Nature all the time. I would say that from submission to review and acceptance, it's reasonable to be 3 to 4 months.
Thank you.
Okay. But it can be much longer. It can be a year if you need to make corrections, if you need to go back and forth, if the reviewers don't reply as quickly as possible and the editor is not pushing them too much. It can be up to or more than a year. It happened to me in the past. Now with the open access journals, and with the fact that all the reviewing is done and the uploading and the reviewing is done online, so there's no hard copy, not sending either through regular mail or through email, things may be faster. But I would say that let's say 3 to 4 months is, I would say it's a minimum to expect.
Thank you. The next question is, what is the average impact factor of articles in aquaculture?
Yeah, I would say 1. I would say 1. There's below 1 and there's above 1. The main aquaculture article or the historically leading aquaculture journal, which is Aquaculture, has a impact factor, I think, of 2, something like that. So most of the journals, the aquaculture related journals, I would say, are between 1 and 2, but there's also some that are below 1. So this is where you should be looking at.
Thank you. The next one is, how about citing submitted unpublished article of other colleagues? No,
this is how would you cite that? I mean, it's not even an article, it's not published, so how would you cite it? If you want to cite work of another colleague, then it falls into this category that Alistair mentioned, which is personal communication. But again, personal communication, it depends on what kind of data you're using. The personal communication, hard data that would require statistical analysis and data processing and things like that, it should be published to be reliable. If it's social data and general information, then that's okay to be personal information, personal communication.
Thank you. And the last question for today is, when in press means it's already accepted but not yet published?
Yeah, like I said, to be in press, to consider your article in press, you have to have received from the journal a confirmation that, dear author, congratulations, your article has been accepted and it will be published in an upcoming issue of the journal. If you get this acceptance, then it means that your article is in press. So from that point on, you can cite your article. So you will put the name of, you will put the citation, authors, title, journal, and then you can put 000, parentheses, in press. This is the day that you received the message, okay? A few days later, in most journals, you will have also a DOI. So instead of writing in press, you can add the DOI, and people can get to the site and find it. If you're talking now about a journal that doesn't publish online and it's only in print, and it will take weeks from the time that it has been accepted to the time that it's been produced, printed, and then you can get a scanned copy or a reprint, then you simply put in press, and this is acceptable because people will know. Let's say somebody gets this article after 10 years, okay, and it will see 2021 Mylonas et al. Aquaculture International in press. Okay, I will make a search for I will go to the site of the journal, Aquaculture International. I will look at the volumes of 2021, and I will make a search by this author's name, and I will find the article. The problem is if you do it and you're wrong, and it has never been in press, you consider it in press when it wasn't. And when somebody doesn't find this, then you're in trouble because you will have a stamp on your forehead that you're a liar. So, if it is in press, there's no problem to submit it in press. Although I have to say that based on the fact that today articles get a DOI almost immediately after acceptance, some articles, some journals may not allow you to use a citation that is in press, that you call it in press, because they know that if it is indeed in press, in a few days it will also have a DOI. Okay, so then they may not allow you. What they will not allow you for sure to do, and maybe this is something that maybe people thinking about but they didn't ask it, is what if an article is under review? Well, under review, what I usually do, I will tell you what I do, and I think this is something that you can use. If I want to cite something that is under review, I will do it. I will do it for two reasons. I will show the reader that I have this work under review, so this gives credence to my work if I cite something that I've already submitted it for review. And by the time my article, the one that I'm talking about now, is been reviewed and accepted and impressed, maybe the other one will be accepted also, and then I will add it as impressed. But it happened to me often, at least 5 times, that by the time one article was ready to be in press, the other article that I had under review did not complete the revision process. Then I removed it. Then when it's time to be published, you cannot cite an article under review. But during the review process, you can do it because it's still active. Okay, and you don't know how far this will go. So the first one that it gets published, then can be cited. The other one gets scratched and goes under unpublished data or something like that.
Thank you, Dino, for the nice tip. And this is actually now the last question. It's really interesting. So how can you reduce plagiarism in materials and methods section, which are most commonly used?
Yeah, this is really a problem, and I sympathize, because this is the problem that I was describing before. That we're working in a certain field. Okay, obviously what we're doing is similar from day to day. The methods that we're using are similar. So we have written the method, the description of the method in a certain way. How can you change the way of the description of the method? It's very difficult. It's very difficult, and it's very annoying when you get from the editorial office, you get a message that please, look at the plagiarism highlights of your article. And it's like, okay, how am I going to say that gonads were collected after excising, but after cutting the fish? Well, fish were cut and then the gonads were excised. The gonads were cut after the fish were killed. First the fish were killed and then the gonads were removed. It's the same thing, and I understand this is a problem, but you just have to be creative and hope that I don't know how this plagiarism software work, but I have a feeling that they put different emphasis on the introduction discussion than on the materials and methods. It cannot be the same, because of what the colleague mentioned, that the materials and methods can be the same not only for you in your work but for the whole world. So I don't know any other solution by just mixing the information and changing it to the point that it will not flick a light of the software.
Thank you, Dino. I think we are done with the question today. Okay. It was really interesting presentation, and I really enjoyed having you here. I can
wish everybody good luck if they try to publish, and just be patient. It takes time.
Definitely. I can say that 75% of people that participated in the poll participated for the first time in your conference, in your presentation. So I hope they gain a lot of knowledge with your presentation. Alistair, do you have anything else to mention at the end?
No, not at all. Just to say that this will be online, but I'll leave you to announce that formally.
Thank you. So the presentation was recorded and it will be published online in the following days. Also, you will be able to download the presentation, as Dinos mentioned earlier, on our website. I will send you all the information in the email in a few days. I would like to thank you for participating today in the webinar, and also in the following email you will get more information about our next webinar. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye, guys.
Bye.